So this week, we're continuing the trend of Kafka security operations, the topic of auditing your Kafka. What does that mean? What are we talking about when we say audits, especially for Kafka? So let's talk about it. We'll first start off this session with a quick story. Hopefully, it helps us all get some context on why these features and capabilities are important, especially when it comes to real-time data, and especially when we look at the world today that is expanding into real time, expanding our usage of Kafka as this distributed message bus with a variety of workloads. So where it's traditionally used for data integration, CDC, database replication, now we've got event-driven microservice backbones, so critical production application data flowing through Kafka. And then now real-time machine learning and AI algorithms all fed off this incredibly important, incredibly sensitive data that is our distributed event log that is Apache Kafka. So let's talk about some security concerns and what we do at Lenses and what you should look for when we're talking about tooling for your developers in Apache Kafka. So we're going to start off with a story. The story is about trendy glasses, e-commerce, uh, best online glasses, now with same day shipping, apparently. And we'll have two personas for this story. We've got Stefan and Marios. So if you tuned in last week or any of our other sessions, you might have caught Stefan and Marios. They are real people. But for today, Stefan is our developer persona and Marios will be our operations persona. And the scenario at Trendy Glasses e-commerce is that we have just recently started our adoption process of Apache Kafka. Traditionally have been using maybe legacy monolithic application code bases, and we're now implementing Kafka for a microservice backbone to modernize our infrastructure. It's been going great, lots of positive results with the new real-time data and the capabilities that Kafka is providing. But we are noticing a significant issue when it comes to troubleshooting issues in production or developing new features. So especially with Stefan's team, who's responsible for developing these new features and delivering business value, it's hard to understand exactly what's going on with Kafka, what patterns of data he's producing into Kafka. And then if there's an issue with his production application that's consuming or producing data, he doesn't have access to prod. So he's unable to get that visibility there. And there's a lot of back and forth between Stefan's team and Marios himself, who supports a variety of teams like Stefan's and is being overloaded with tickets for requesting observability into a specific Kafka message, resetting consumer offsets, everything you would need to do essentially at Kafka CLI. To address this pressing concern for Stefan, he started relying on an open source tool he found on GitHub to be able to view data either in development, hopefully, or worse, in production too. This has addressed that short-term need. He doesn't need to go and submit a ticket to Marios' team quite as frequently, and he's able to be a little bit more independent and has some productivity savings there. But now it's becoming an issue because word is spreading that he has access to a tool that he can look at Kafka data and examine what's going on in the environment, and they're requesting access to Stefan's tool as well. And it'd be important to highlight that this is a common scenario that we hear when we're talking to prospects. And then the core driving issue here is that native Kafka does have an observability problem. You'll commonly hear Kafka referred to as a black box. That's because the way we're usually interacting with Kafka natively is via CLI. So when it comes to understanding exactly what message a consumer group is being hung on or specific data quality patterns, it can be really tricky to understand the actual patterns of data being produced into Kafka, application status as far as what's consuming and what the problem messages are causing issues. It's really hard to get this information from CLI. Not to mention that requires learning CLI commands. If you're onboarding a new developer who's new to Kafka, there's a bit of a learning curve there. And overall, just causing issues is this observability problem that native Kafka has. And seeking to address this problem is where Stefan has went ahead and just implemented his own tool out of frustration, out of this lack of observability, out of dealing with the black box. There is open source tooling out there, but the issue is when it comes to using those tools, and I should highlight that because tooling wasn't provided to his team that provides this level of observability and has security governance rules in place, and especially audit logs in place, we are now posing significant security concerns and risk to our infrastructure. Some questions that we might have around some open source tooling we'll get to in a second. But things to keep in mind when you're looking at tooling for Kafka especially as it relates to solving the observability problem without posing significant security risks. There's also risks if you don't have tooling and you're still using ACLs for command line access too. It's pretty common to talk to customers and prospects who are just getting started with Kafka. If they are using ACLs for user access, that turns out a lot of those developers are actually sharing those credentials and using the same ACLs. So even if you're collecting logs at the Kafka broker level, you're really not sure who's doing what in your environment. And open source tooling has similar issues as well, where it's designed to provide you information, but not designed and doesn't have the features in place to correctly authenticate and authorize users around who says they are actually this person and what can that person actually be able to do. So these would be the top security concerns here, whether you're using ACLs for command line access or you're looking for tooling outside of native Kafka. So if it's an open source tool or tool that provides observability into these critical data flows, is our access points publicly available? Is this a URL that anyone can go to and log in with default admin credentials and immediately see production or development Kafka data flowing through our cluster today? The other question is, how are developers authenticating to access the tooling? Is it shared credentials, username, password, again, maybe available in a breach somewhere? Or are they actually using SSO and using an external identity provider, which is typically commonplace and required? Once they're authenticated, then how are they authorized? Are these developers following a principles of least privilege for their authorization and the role-based access controls? You can be sure that if your operations team hasn't provided tooling and a developer acquired their own, they're probably not restricting their own access just to follow security patterns. That isn't their job, really. They should be security minded, but their core job is to provide business value. So if I'm a developer, I want admin access. Not always the best situation, though, and it needs to be enforced, especially when it comes to tooling for Kafka. And is the tooling correctly configured, or is it a potential vector, attack vector? So ties back into, is this endpoint publicly accessible? Is authentication configured? What kind of information can I get if I do know the endpoint of this tool? And all of that good stuff, making sure that is not a potential attack vector. And then how are changes being tracked? If using this tooling, I can deploy assets, create a new topic, change topic configurations, reset consumer offsets. How are we tracking who performed this change and when they did that? That's going to be important for one, troubleshooting any issues. If someone comes online and accidentally reduces a topic's retention period to 10 seconds instead of 10 days, that's a significant issue. And we need to know who made that change and when and why they're able to do that, as well as who's viewing data and who's running queries on my data, especially when it comes to these real-time critical production data flows. So making sure everything is configured and has the guardrails in place to prevent an attack, but then also the capabilities to record what's going on, what's being changed, and who's viewing what, so that we can respond to an audit and understand that, yes, we have guardrails in place, here's how they work, and we can view them all working here successfully. And I'm flying by a little fast right now, but if you have any questions, definitely let me know. Or if you've had a situation that this is ringing a bell and maybe have some PTSD about, let me know that too. Awesome. Which brings us to the risks and general risks that we have, which with Kafka. And this is risk for data services in general, right? If everything is not configured correctly, these would be what we're risking. As one is a denial of service attack. So this is when an adversarial actor actually brings down a service, either temporarily or permanently. This can be something like a DDoS or ransomware attack. Someone is attacking your services and bringing it down, making it unavailable, and your enterprise, your company is losing money. Potentially worse could be a data breach incident. So sensitive data has been exported from internal stores to outside your network and is available for a malicious actor to then sell online or use maliciously. So these are the two main risks that we want to be preventing with these guardrails in place: governance, SSO, and then also that we know that we're preventing with those rules, and we can prove that with our audit logs. Which leads us into, why do we have audits? A security audit is in place so that security operations, compliance, and risk teams can monitor and track user activity. And this helps them report and respond to security posture and incidents. It's the ability to say, yes, our security posture is solid. Here's why. Users are authenticated using SSO. We reach out to the identity provider, understand exactly what group they need to be a part of. We assign RBAC based on that group. We can alert on user activity, and then we audit everything they do within our infrastructure and export that to our SEIEM platform. This also helps out with compliance posture as well. So ensuring that you are compliant with all of the relevant laws and regulations there. So some questions to ask when you are assigning your security posture, looking at tooling for Kafka from a security perspective would be, are different teams able to view and edit assets outside their scope of responsibility? So in looking to address that observability issue that we mentioned, are we enabling developers and key shareholders in actual Kafka data the ability to view the data they need to, edit the assets they need to, but only within their defined roles and responsibilities following principles of least privilege? So addressing the observability problem, but also making sure that they're not going outside their scope and able to do anything they shouldn't be able to, especially cause issues in production. Another question to ask would be, are sensitive data fields, such as private information or private health information, easily viewed or queried? So this ties back into compliance. We want to address the observability problem, but also make sure that sensitive data fields, credit card numbers, personal health information isn't easily viewed and queried by a developer who doesn't have an interest in that data. They shouldn't be able to view it, but they should be able to troubleshoot a problem when it comes up and develop new features that actually use that information. Another question to ask when you're looking at tooling and in general, when you're using Apache Kafka is, am I tracking where these sensitive data fields are being stored? Quite often, not only do you have to use PII, it's being stored in Kafka, but how are you tracking where, what topics are storing the sensitive data fields? And then how are you tracking where this information is going? Which connectors are syncing this into a database? Which applications are reading this data and presenting to a front end somewhere? And then the last question would be, how do I know who has implemented a specific change? So if someone has changed a group policy, changed permissions, changed a topic configuration, and someone pushes a change into my environment, how am I tracking to know who is responsible for that change and when it was created? So those are all tied into how to address the observability problem and things to keep in mind when we are, so that we can ensure that we are not permitting too much access and we're addressing those technical security risks. And a bit on how we do that at Lenses is, one, we integrate with LDAP and SSO, SAML to authenticate and authorize users. So they will log in to our user interface or authenticate with our API. We will then submit that request to the identity provider, understand that this person is who they say they are, and then these are the roles and responsibilities they should have within the platform. After that, we also have alerts for incidents managing. We have out-of-the-box integrations with Datadog, PagerDuty, Splunk, Prometheus Alert Manager, Slack, and then webhooks for anything that we don't have available out of the box. And then we have full audit logs that you can easily export to our security and incident event management platform. And that'll be a good segue into our demo where I can show how all of that works in our Lenses environment. So when I first log into Lenses, this will be the holistic dashboard that we see here. From here, we have user group permissions. I'll just show you how these work briefly. It should be just enough to know that there is ability to assign permissions for a user group. You can see here that this orders team has access to any Kafka topic that contains the string orders. So combined with topic naming conventions, where you say these are the patterns of topic names that can be created, you would then assign permissions for a user group based on a namespace. You can see all the permissions that a user in this group would have for this topic namespace. So that's how we handle RBAC and authentication. Then within Lenses itself, we have data masking policies as well. So this addresses the sensitive data field. This would be telling us, look, we have sensitive data fields defined as address ID, Toto, and Tutu, and we're searching all topics for these fields. So if there is an address stored in a topic, I don't want a developer to actually be able to view that data. I'm going to mask it and only leave the first two characters here. Still enabling a developer to troubleshoot an application, develop a new feature, but not subject and exposed to the actual sensitive data field. And what's great about this feature too, is that I don't have to actually redact this field. It's in development, it's not real data, but I can still report on where that data is being stored, which topics have these data fields, but then also where that data is going. So which connectors are consuming or producing that data, as well as SQL processors that might be applying a transformation in streaming fashion, as well as any external applications that are registered with lenses to work with these data fields. So that's what we have in place as far as guardrails. And then to ensure that all of those guardrails in place, everything looks good, we have our actual audit logs. From the audit logs, you can configure the granularity here, but even something as simple as viewing a data set will be logged here. And I can see Simone's been busy in our demo environment.
That's what I say. Simone is working hard. This is the best days.
Especially about an hour ago. So I can see everything that anyone's been doing, either from the Lenses UI or again by our API or CLI as well. That will all be tracked here in the audit logs. You can see there's some initial filtering. I have some search capabilities. If I search for my user, I can see that user is updated here. So a good way to track who's doing what changes have been done, and even who's viewing data, who's querying data, who's syncing it to an external source. So I know that I'm compliant with all the regulations I need to be. I've got those guardrails in place, and I can actually prove it. That also leads us to the ability to sync this audit log to an external channel. So we have the ability to export this audit log. It does get retained in our Postgres metastore, but typically you'll rely on an external tool and platform like Splunk to run advanced queries on this audit log, anomalous behavior detection, and I can give you a quick view of how that looks with my Splunk environment. So I am taking that same audit log and I am syncing it to my local Splunk environment here. And I can easily see exactly what events are happening. So within my entire Kafka infrastructure, it's easy for me to track and understand who's been doing what. So if I need to ask the question of, hey, who's removed any asset from my production environment? Maybe they deleted a topic, maybe they just deleted Kafka messages. Who has performed a removal event? Splunk makes it really easy for me to filter that here and get those results. Features that you get from an SIEM platform like Splunk would be anomalous behavior detection that we don't natively provide. Something as simple as this is filtering. You can definitely do within the Lenses UI. What is next too? So you have the ability to dashboard well for quick and easy understanding of what your users are doing and what behavior has been going on, so that if there is a security event, it's very easy to track and hopefully be alerted on it as it's happening. But then if you ever need to do a post-mortem and understand what went wrong when, this is the kind of tool that you'd be using to do that. So I'm exporting my audit logs as Splunk, and I can easily view that data here in my dashboard, where I'm seeing all users, actions, viewed actions, see 51 view events, remove actions, 14 here, 6 update actions, as well as 9 log in and 5 log out, and then 21 add events. So a super simple dashboard. These get much more complicated, much more quickly, depending on the issue we're looking to troubleshoot and provide information on here. But important to note that one, your Kafka tooling is providing the observability your developers need to be productive, but also they have the tooling has the correct guardrails in place. It's correctly configured from a security standpoint, and everything is being tracked. All changes are being tracked in an audit log, and hopefully is exported to my centralized security infrastructure event manager. Important to note that beyond user activity logs, especially within a tool like Lenses, you're still going to want to collect logs on the actual infrastructure. So Lenses will not pick up on a CLI command applied directly to the broker. We will not be able to log that behavior since it's not going through Lenses. So it'd be important to track those logs within your actual underlying infrastructure, as well as your CI/CD flow. So we've had some great sessions showing how you can integrate Lenses with your CI/CD flow using our CLI and the connectors as code feature. There's more to come. It's still important to know who's approving those PRs, what that CI/CD flow looks like. And so you're going to want to log those events as well, since changes are being applied as code first and then pushed to Lenses. It's also important to track your identity provider's logs. So when a user signs in with SSO, we will send that request to your Azure AD, for instance. They'll authenticate the user and respond with a token approving their access and giving us a group ID but it's still important to track those logs so we can ensure that we're receiving that claim correctly, and then that user really is who they say they are with the correct group credentials. And that's everything I have about audit logs for today. If you have any questions, we definitely have some time. So feel free to raise a hand, let us know. Also, if you have any topic requests for any future Kafka live sessions, please feel free to chime in and let us know what you'd cover. We can see about getting that added to our calendar. If you're feeling a little bit nervous right now to come online, definitely join our Slack community and you can interface with the wider team there.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I have one kind of endorsement because one thing that I saw over the years working with open source solution is usually people want to use Kafka, but they have these fears that everything they show, how I gonna be mitigating risks, how I can see what's doing what. Because the same way that you want to open up the data that you have, you are a company or enterprise. So you have to worry about who is accessing the book, how if something mess it up, like some topic disappear and no one knows what happens, are you gonna know which one that disappeared that topic? I saw, for example, a similar problem that was solved. Actually, I'm not going to say in the list, but the list is going to solve by lenses because the same thing happens. Someone in the team brings Kafka. Kafka begins to get popular. So we have four squads working in the same group of topics and no one knows what is doing what. So someone just increase the partition, start to rebalancing and then change over and no one knows what happens. And then it was crazy. And I recall that was in the war room and the people get crazy because of this. And it's okay, but what you guys have in tooling, what you guys are using to see beyond Kafka, because Kafka is meant to do one thing that he does perfect fine, but he not does everything. You have to do some tooling for this. And they don't know, we don't have. So they start to use the tooling and it's say, okay, now we can see what's happening. Now we can see what, now we have more governance of our environment. There's beyond that. And it's amazing. Everything that you say, I believe that when people see this, they're gonna identify, okay, I passed through this road and I know how crime was. Yeah. Great presentation. Thanks for that.
No, and perfect story because this is a real issue that organizations have when they first get started with a tool like Kafka. It's, oh, they can do all this really cool technical stuff, but then we need to address the observability problem. And this governance and security, often than not, comes as the afterthought. So the more a centralized data team can be thinking ahead, ensuring that their development teams have the tools they need to be productive, then they can enforce those security postures and best practices and precede those kinds of issues where you have that panicked war room. Nobody knows who changed what, grepping through actual logs yourselves. Yeah, it can be a nightmare. So perfect. Thank you for that story. Awesome. Perfect. And that has been security audits, auditing your Kafka.